everything we do is based on having a growth mindset. Every decision you and I make now is based on that. And again, I still have my days where I'm sure I have my limiting beliefs and my blocks and my imposter syndrome and all that, of course. But the way I think now is way different than I used to think.
Now matters, yes, but the past matters to learn from it. The now matters to build, and the future matters because you can get better and better and better and better.
Next Level Nation, welcome back to another very special, as always, episode of Next Level University, where we teach you how to level up your life, your love, your health, and your wealth. We hope you enjoyed our latest episode, number 1041, Where Your Fear of Money Comes From. Today, for episode number 1042, Is Your Mindset Holding You Back? So, as you know, we recently read Mindset by one Carol Dweck in our Next Level U book club, and Alan came to me and said, hey, I want to do an episode on a framework that is in that book that Carol Dweck talks about. And I said, awesome, cool. I don't know what it is because I did not attend book club, so you are going to have to run this, and here we are today, and we're going to do it.
We're going to do it.
We're going to do it.
So how is it that someone can have a happy, healthy, productive, wholesome childhood and end up not having a happy, healthy, productive life? And how is it that someone can have a really, really, really challenging, traumatic childhood and end up being someone who is not only super effective and productive, but very successful and having a really big positive impact in the world? And so there's a bunch of different stories we could talk about here. You've got Oprah Winfrey's story, pregnant by age 13, African-American woman, the challenges that she faced and the traumas that she faced in her childhood from her father and her stepfather. I don't know the exact story, but I do know that Oprah has contributed more to this world than most people do. And I know that she had a more traumatic childhood than most people do. And so what is it that makes the difference, right? Whether it's Oprah or anyone you can think of out there that really life has just stepped on. And in my coaching work, I often find these stories and I learn about people because it's coaching and it's aspirational, but there's also a therapy piece of going through people's past and understanding their traumas. And often some of the people that go through the worst things end up as the strongest, highest contributing, most effective human beings. And not always, but a lot of the time. And it's like, well, what does make the difference? And I think mindset is a huge piece of it. Mindset, you can change it to mindset. You can think of it as the way in which you think. If you're a new listener of this show, Next Level University, you don't know this, but we used to have a podcast called the Hyper Conscious Podcast. I was actually giving a training last night, Kev, and Gloria was on there, Glow, and she was the reason most of the Young Living community actually found us. So she found our podcast, the Hyper Conscious Podcast, like 3.5 years ago or something crazy, and we were talking about that last night. And so the Hyper Conscious Podcast was built on this simple framework: change the way you think, change the way you act, change the way you live. Hyper-conscious living, which means to be acutely aware. And so essentially what that podcast could have been called is how to change your fixed mindset into a growth mindset. And obviously it's more than that, but at the end of the day, how is it that some people end up achieving all of their dreams and having a massive impact in the world, regardless of some of the horrible things that have happened to them or around them? And then some people who really have had a lot of opportunity end up not achieving their dreams, not having goals, not having aspirations. A lot of it has to do with mindset, a very, very big piece of it. And I think mindset, in a weird way, it's like it's over talked about in the industry, but in a weird way, it's still under talked about. Let me explain. A lot of people talk about mindset, and mindset has become a buzzword. But what we don't talk about enough, I think, is how much of a difference it really does make over the long term. I think in the short term, it's hard to tell the difference. And if Kevin and I were to sit here and say, okay, what's the biggest difference between you two now and you two 5 years ago when you first started the Hyperconscious Podcast? I would say one of the biggest differences is the way we think. which is our mindset, the way we filter information, the way we see ourselves, the way we see the world. And so in Carol Dweck's book, there's this simple, I was on book club, and we were obviously reading this book in book club, and I said to everyone, I just hit what I believe to be the most valuable page in this entire book. And I took a screenshot of it. I actually sent it in our WhatsApp group. So our book club has a private WhatsApp group. And I want to read it on and do an episode about it. So it's a framework, and it's got two brains on the page, one to the left, one to the right. On the left is the fixed mindset, and this is in Carol Dweck's book. The fixed mindset is a belief that intelligence and capabilities are static. In other words, they cannot be changed, which leads to a desire to look smart and therefore a tendency to 1, avoid challenges, 2, get defensive or give up easily, 3, see effort as fruitless, 4, ignore useful negative feedback, and 5, feel threatened by the success of others. And then on the right side of the page is a growth mindset, which is a deep belief that intelligence and capabilities can be developed over time, which leads to a desire to learn and therefore a tendency to 1, embrace challenges, 2, persist in the face of setbacks, 3, see effort as the path to mastery, 4, learn from criticism. I didn't always do very well at that one. And then 5, find lessons and inspiration in the success of others. And this is a spectrum. And for all of our listeners today, what we're going to analyze is it's not what happens to you, it's what you choose to do about it. And of course, sometimes bad things happen to good people. We've all had bad things happen to us, some to a greater degree than others, some more frequently than others. But at the end of the day, what really matters, what is within our control, is how we react. And the biggest piece of how we react really is our mindset.
I think back, Alan, I've told you this before, that I know that wasn't a long delay in the stream. I know there's some stuff going on behind the scenes technically with StreamYard for some reason, so I don't want you to think that there's just a lag. Okay. I've told you this story before, or I've told you versions of this story. The company I used to work for that did HVAC, we used to have to race to the bank. Mm-hmm. Remember I've told you that? What I don't talk about often is how that job really, 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 really hurt my confidence. So if you don't know what HVAC is, it's heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. That's the industry. We would go into people's houses and we would install, usually it was like air conditioning units. So you'd put the carrier in the basement and you'd run a bunch of different, I don't know, they're like tin.
Ventilation.
Yeah, but they're like the tin, I don't even know what they're called. Like ventilation.
Tubing.
Yeah, but it's not, I don't know. There's like a name for it. I just don't know what it is off the top of my head.
I got nothing for you, brother.
Yeah, me either.
By the way, okay. I'm going to need you to come by in the condo. It's too hot up in my office,
yeah,
man.
Trust me, I couldn't help you if I tried. That's why I didn't stick around at this job for very long. But
we need to get one of those extenders. Go ahead.
Yeah. If you've ever been to a house and you go down to the basement and you see the tin stuff running across, it's like insulated. That's what we used to install. And off of those, you would run.
Obviously, you didn't do too well at this job.
I just, for some reason, I can't remember what it was called.
It's all good. This is funny, though.
And off of that, you would run what is called flex. So that's the flexible tubing that actually goes to the outlet that spits it into your room. But I remember they were such bad leaders. And they were such a terrible company to work for because every time you did something wrong, they would make you feel like crap about yourself. Like, I won't say they were like berating me every time I did something wrong, but it was very, very, very negative. And that was one of the first jobs I ever had. And that definitely contributed to me having a fixed mindset, 100%. Because in that job, when you don't do well, you get made fun of, and there is no it's not constructive criticism. It's destructive criticism. And then every other job I had after that, I think in the back of my mind, it was like, well, if I do wrong, if I do badly, if I don't do it correctly, I'm going to either be punished, I'm going to be made fun of. And somebody asked me the other day, Alan, about the biggest thing, what's the biggest difference between Kev today and Kev 5 years ago? And I said, honestly, I think I've failed so much over the last 5 years. And my association with failure and understanding that failure is progressive. Like when you're failing, you're making progress as long as you keep going. And if I had a fixed mindset still, there's no possible way I would be where I am. No way. Because everything we do is based on having a growth mindset. Every decision you and I make now is based on that. And again, I still have my days where I'm sure I have my limiting beliefs and my blocks and my imposter syndrome and all that, of course. But the way I think now is way different than I used to think. And if you're out there and maybe that doesn't seem possible, because I know for me, one of the first conversations we had about self-improvement, Alan, was we were talking about neuroplasticity. And I remember you saying like, well, you can like change the makeup of your brain. And I was like, I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think that's how it works. I don't know. I don't know. For me, it was always what I have right now is what I have forever in terms of intelligence. And I told Taryn this recently. I said, there were times where Alan and I would have such deep conversations for so long that I would get headaches. And I would have to say like, hey, I can't do it anymore. Like, let's watch Friends or something. And you and I had like a series of very, very, very deep, long conversations one of these Mondays. And I told Taryn, I said, it's weird because 5 years ago, I could not have handled that. Today, it was pretty much nothing. It's nothing compared to what it used to be. And that just speaks to, that's the growth mindset over the years of continuing to expand and learn and grow. And that just speaks to how much you can change over a given period of time.
Totally random, but I think, I talk about how I definitely had some fixed mindset tendencies. I don't think I always took feedback as constructive. I don't think I've always taken feedback well. And sometimes I think I did, but not always. But what I want to ask you is, can you think of a decision or series of events that with the way you used to think, you really were the biggest problem? In hindsight, like you were the biggest problem. And how would you have done things differently had you had a growth mindset?
Oh, man. It's so hard because I don't even know if I would have been in the positions I was in if I had a growth mindset.
I think about this often. I think that one of the most important things is mindset. I think another one is skills. Because I'm thinking to myself, like, what are the things that really do make the biggest difference? Because people say, well, you can't predict the future. And it's like, no, you can have high probability guesses at the future and based on the now and the past. If you study the past and the present, you definitely can put yourself on the high end of probability. So for example, if you are reckless and you drunk drive all the time, statistically speaking, you're going to get very hurt. It's not guaranteed, but if you're a super safe driver who always wears their seatbelt and always drives very safely and pays attention, like you're much less likely to get in an accident. So there's a book I'm reading right now called Think Again by Adam Grant, and he's talking about forecasters. Apparently there are forecasters, not like weather forecasters, but forecasters that can predict elections, they can predict future stock prices. Like that's all stock pickers are really doing. They're saying, I think this company will be more successful in the future. And they're looking at certain things in the past and the present to determine that. And so I think one of the things that I've found to be fascinating is in my coaching, really what I'm trying to do is identify, okay, this person wants this level of success. What needs to shift? Okay, they definitely need to be more consistent. They definitely need to find more self-discipline, which by the way, they would have if they had mathematical certainty that they actually would achieve the goal. So I got to help them understand that like if you do X, Y, Z, you actually will make the chocolate cake, so to speak, in this analogy. And then you definitely need more skills. I mean, you have to master your craft more, right? I mean, if you want a successful podcast, you got to get better at podcasting. I feel like that's kind of a given. And then you've got this mindset piece, which is you have to fail until. You have to fail forward. You have to be okay with failure to actually get good at things. That's like wanting to be, a professional baseball player and being like, I don't want to really lose games. Like, no, I'm not going to lose any games. It's like, well, you can't play then because everyone loses games, right? So, my question for you, can you think of a time where you really jeffed yourself by having a fixed mindset?
Bonnie here. I just wanted to share my experience with group coaching and some of the things that I got out of it. So going into group coaching, I was not tracking any habits at all. And I had sort of jumped on board habit tracking here and there, knowing it was a good idea, but not sort of ever succeeding with it. And so now some of them have become habits. I'm happy to say I wake up, I have a glass of water without even thinking about it anymore. So now I think it's probably time to gear up and like increase my water intake or change the water one a little bit, something like that. And so I highly encourage people to jump into group coaching. There's so much information that you will get out of it. I recommend bringing a notebook to all of the sessions and taking lots of notes, asking lots of questions, and rewatching the videos, because it is the video coaching part is just packed with information. I also really recommend that you check in with your accountability buddy and sort of lift each other up throughout the experience, because there's lots of momentum, it's really exciting, and then it gets hard. And so stick with it and carry on, and your life will be better for it. Okay, take care.
I mean, the fire, going through the fire academy was the biggest one that jumps off the page.
There's got to be some others.
Not
I have
as
one.
Painful.
I didn't apply to MIT because my guidance counselor told me I wouldn't get in, and I believed him, and I shouldn't have. A growth mindset would have said, okay, I'm going to apply anyway.
No.
So I have a bunch of them, but mine are like little things like that. I don't know if, I would say in sports for sure. I feel like in sports, I always wanted to win versus get better. I think the priority was winning, and then getting better was a byproduct. I wish that I had flipped the script. I wish that getting better was the focus and then winning was the byproduct. Right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a vulnerable conversation for me.
I resonate with that.
Yeah.
I resonate
Right?
with
It's
that.
almost like I would rather focus on getting better and then end up winning rather than just focusing on winning and then hope you get better.
Yeah. When I started doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I was like really good, just naturally, because I'm strong and I'm fast and I was very flexible. And I remember, so it goes white belt, blue belt. I don't even remember. I think it's like white belt, blue belt, purple belt, brown belt, black belt. And when I was a white belt, like fresh in, I was competing with like a fairly high level blue belt who was kind of like the talk of the class because he was young and he was like really good. And there was times where I actually like beat him. And I remember that was like good enough. I was like, oh, awesome. I'm like better than him, but I didn't want to like get better. I wasn't obsessed with getting better. I don't know if I thought, I think I assumed my natural talent was where it was probably maxed out.
Fixed mindset.
Yeah.
And in hindsight, if you had focused on getting better, you'd be amazing.
I would have been really, really, and there's, again, I don't think I'd be the best in the world or anything like that, but I definitely could have been way, way, way better than average.
Right.
And I remember too, this is a good example. There's, so if you think of it this way, there's a bunch of different submissions. There's arm bars, there's triangle chokes, there's knee bars, there's a bunch of different stuff. But anything you can do on one side, you can usually do on the other side of the body. So say I wanted to put Alan in an arm bar, I can take his left arm or I can take his right arm.
Hypothetically.
Yeah. I would always do one. So for me, it would be your right arm. I didn't learn the other side. I never learned the other side. I was really good at one side, like triangle chokes, head arm chokes. I was really good at one side, but I was not good at the other side because I said like, this works. I'm good at this. I'm not willing to look bad and learn again. So I would say that's probably another good story.
I have a good one. I remember you went from lifting, you were bench pressing like 225 or something regularly, and then you went all the way back. Do you remember?
Yeah.
I remember lifting with you, and I was lifting way heavier weight than you because you went all the way back. You could tell that story.
That was in Florida. Alan and I, when we lived in Florida, so I had a shoulder injury. It was at the point where I could not put my right arm behind my back. Like I couldn't put my right arm behind my back. I could barely touch like the back of my pants. And I was starting to have a bunch of shoulder issues and shoulder pain, and I couldn't bench press and I couldn't shoulder press. And I remember for like 6 months, every single day I did a pretty hardcore mobility strengthening routine that I found online. And then I realized I think I've been doing a lot of my exercises wrong. So Alan and I, we were living in Florida at the time. We lived in Florida for a month. And I remember we went to the gym and I decided I'm going to go all the way back to basics and just figure out how to move my body with no weight. And then hopefully that'll be the beginning for me. And I ended up getting up to, I think I bench pressed 295 pounds that year. And that was me. I was strong enough to lift weight. It's not like I had to go all the way back to the beginning from an injury. But for me, it was very much the growth mindset of, well, if I go back and I make sure my form is correct and I'm actually using the right muscles and I have the right motion and everything is the way it should be, theoretically, I should be stronger anyway. So taking 4 steps back to take 20 steps ahead, I would say that's definitely indicative of a growth mindset.
But think about it this way, right? Honestly, imagine Kevin and I in decent shape, and he's putting 25-pound plates for incline bench press.
It wasn't even that.
In the gym, barely even that. And, if his goal was to look good in the gym, look good in the moment, he never would have done that.
Yeah.
And then he never would have benched the 295. In coaching, that's a very common thing. It's like sometimes you have to go back to the basics and let that phoenix burn down so that you can rise stronger. And you're not going all the way back to the beginning because you still had all that muscle mass. But you're re-practicing the fundamentals to build a new foundation. I think, but if you were trying to look good or look strong or look jacked in front of other people, you never would have done that. I think that's the fixed mindset. I think in the fixed mindset, it's kind of like, well, I'd rather win this game than practice dribbling with my left so that the next game I might be better. And I think, we'll bring you behind the scenes too. I know we got to go. Kevin and I, we did that live podcast. We just did our 119th in a row. One of the reasons we did that was one of the hardest things we've ever done. I personally think that's one of the hardest things we ever do. Now the Conscious Couples podcast is actually challenging me in new ways. But if you think about the live podcast back when it was more keynote style, obviously it didn't work very well at my speaking abilities. But that's 52 brand new keynotes to the same audience every single year. The reason we did that is mastery and of course impact as well. But it's not easy to come up with, at one point we were doing 10 points on a new topic every single week. We were doing 52 brand new keynotes a year for almost 2 years. Wait, 52 times 2. So for more than 2 years. It was one of the hardest things ever. Every time we'd get off those, it was like, wow, that was so hard. Like that was brutal. That was challenging. And we were trying hard to not say the same stories or give the same examples or reference the same studies. We were trying to practice our craft. I remember at one point we were saying too much. And then at one point we were using filler words. I said basically every other word. And now I use essentially, so keep an eye out for that. But we were interrupting each other, all kinds of stuff. So if we were so afraid of looking bad rather than getting better, we probably wouldn't be as good as we are today.
Yeah, it's so important. It's so important. It's interesting too, because in a way you do have to just get comfortable. I don't want to say comfortable looking bad, but understand that it's not always the actual performance that is the performance, right? So we've done 1,000 episodes, and yeah, my goal in this episode is to make this episode as valuable as possible, but I'm going to come back tomorrow. So if it's not as valuable as I want it to be, I'll just try to do a little bit better tomorrow. And I think that's an interesting perspective, is the last speech is only the last speech if you don't do another speech. The last podcast episode is only the last podcast episode, the last performance. That's a very important part of the growth mindset is I can take, so this is the example, I've used this before. You can make a pyramid out of popsicle sticks and they might all crash down and fall, and then you can rebuild again tomorrow. You can say, well, that didn't work. Let me try this new way. And it is one of those things of, do you have the perseverance to do it long enough? Really? I'm not overly concerned about now anymore. Like I used to be. I used to be very, very, very concerned with now more than anything. Anything. Nothing else mattered. And now it's very much, do I wish we had 1 million downloads today? Yes. Do I wish we made $1 million today? Yes. But in a way, it's like, I know it'll happen eventually because we're doing the right things consistently and we're focused on improvement and we're never going to stop. And I think that's the ultimate goal for me, is to get to that point where it's now is now, but it's only as important as it is. If that makes any sense.
I'll
It's
try
important.
real hard.
Go ahead.
I'll try real hard to explain this. This is taking me back. The very first time you interviewed me, we talked about this.
Did we? I would never remember that.
I said something along the lines, and keep in mind, I sucked pretty bad back then at speaking. But I was trying to get better. So I said something along the lines of, if you wake up every day and invest today to try to make tomorrow brighter, eventually you'll wake up and your whole life will be awesome. And now I realize why that didn't land, right? It's not that good. But essentially what it is everyone does their best, but not everyone betters their best. And so I want to focus more. I do think at NLU we focus more on bettering our best than on being the best every day. There's no such thing, really. We all can do our best on this podcast episode. But remember this. Kevin and I's worst performance right now is better than our best performance could have ever been at episode 50.
Yeah.
And that's the way that I try to think. And if you've not read the book The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek, you gotta read it, because it's about this. It's about this mindset of now matters, yes, but the past matters to learn from it. The now matters to build, and the future matters because you can get better and better and better and better. And when you focus more on being better than on being the quote-unquote proverbial best that doesn't exist anyway, or the quote-unquote perfect, the pursuit of perfection is a beautiful thing. Perfection itself doesn't exist. There's always going to be a better iPhone. The iPhone 16 will be better than the iPhone 14. And this camera is really nice, but the camera 3 years from now that we have is going to be better. And this backdrop is really nice, but I mean, Alessandro, you and I were on the phone earlier redoing our website again, because it's going to keep getting better and better and better and better. And I think it's iterative, and I think the growth mindset is iterative. And so I'm not as smart as I could be, but I'm smarter than I used to be. And I think that's just a really, really important mindset to have in your path to getting to the next level. There's always a next level. And as long as you're pursuing getting to that next level, and focusing on getting better, you'll get there.
We started the podcast. It was all about mindset and hyperconsciousness. We revisit here today. Next Level Nation, if you are looking to level up your community and you are the person in your circle that has the aspirations, the big goals, the big dreams, and oftentimes you're afraid to talk about what you really want out of life, please join our private Facebook group, Next Level Nation. It is the place for you. Link is in the show notes, and we want you to join.
Also, as you know, you've probably heard a lot, we have something called group coaching. We are currently working on graduating 72 individuals. So we've already graduated 62, and we're going to graduate 72 by the end of this quarter. October 4th, we're opening an 8th group. At this point, it's a very well-polished product. You can go to the landing page, check it out. You can also reach out to Kevin and myself if you have any questions at all. We can literally show you testimonials. We can have you reach out to other group coaching members. They can tell you their experience. We have a payment plan option that makes it very, very affordable to everybody. It's a 3-month program. Achieve more in 90 days than you ever have before. Be on a team of like-minded individuals, all working towards their most important goals, where we have an assistant coach. We've got a private WhatsApp group and WhatsApp community. You've got Kevin and myself bi-weekly sessions. We've got bi-weekly office hours on the off weeks. You're going to have a peak performance partner with you, supporting you every step of the way. Group coaching's awesome. It's so good. I hope you join. We are super, super excited to have you. The link will be in the show notes.
Show notes.
Show notes.
Show notes. Next Level Nation tomorrow for episode number 1043. Recognizing a huge lesson from your past. I'm actually very, very excited about that episode because that's something I don't know if we've ever talked about. As always, we love you. We appreciate you. Grateful for each and every one of you. And at NLU, we do not have fans. We have family. We will talk to you all tomorrow.
Please reach out.